10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome to the second and final day of the AI4 Cybersecurity Summit. We have an amazing lineup of speakers to learn from today, along with equally notable attendees to network with. If you didn't say hi to that special person yesterday, the time is now. To kick us off today, I'm excited to introduce Balu Arumugam. Balu is Chief Security Architect for Mars, Inc. Within that role, he focuses on advancing the global security architecture of the enterprise with responsibilities spanning budget management, global transformation initiatives, and establishing a 21st century global security architecture. Please join me in welcoming Balu to the virtual stage.
Thanks, Patrika. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to talk about quantum computing, quantum AI, and its impact on cybersecurity. Google in October 2019, they announced that they reached quantum supremacy. So what does that really mean? Google has built a working quantum computer using a 54-qubit quantum chip. Qubit is equivalent of bit in traditional computing. This 54-qubit quantum computer was able to perform a computation in 200 seconds that would take a traditional supercomputer, the most powerful supercomputer, to 10,000 years to actually perform that computation. So that it basically it meant that quantum computer is able to surpass the performance of a traditional computer. So that basically what is defined as supremacy. What is quantum? So what is quantum mechanics, right? So it's I think we are going back to the particle science for the next big thing, I guess. So it's a particle that can exist in two different states at the same time. I think that's kind of in a traditional computing world, it's the state is either 1 or 0, but in the quantum world, it is 1 and 0 at the same time, right? So it's basically sort of a concept called superposition. And that basically sort of helps, the performance aspects of that's a differentiating factor for quantum mechanics, right? So a quantum computer, and entanglement is also another interesting phenomenon. It's two different particles can become, they become intrinsically related or entangled. The outcome, if we measure, even if they are apart, even over greater distances, the outcome is the same. So I think that, in a way, I think that actually sort of has a lot of benefit in the cybersecurity world, which we will cover a little bit later. So quantum mechanics and quantum computing. Quantum computing is basically sort of harnessing and exploiting the amazing benefits of quantum mechanics, right? So, as you have seen, Google has already done the amazing thing, the hardware side, but they have also introduced open source quantum AI algorithm framework for developers to actually sort of use that to go solve real world problems, right? So I think, Volkswagen and Daimler and Airbus and the number of other companies are already started using quantum computer to solve real world problems. When is this going to become mainstream, right? So I think that's a question. When is this going to be available for all the companies, all the enterprises to use? So I think one sort of a prediction says by 2023, most of the companies that are looking at quantum computing will actually use quantum computing as a service. I think that's already available. That companies have companies have actually sort of already started, using QCAS right now. But I think that will pick up by 2023. Will be, we'll see most of the organizations using it. Quantum supremacy. I think we spoke about the race. So as you can see here, there are companies, there are countries across the world trying to sort of, trying to basically sort of accelerate the innovation in the quantum space. So U.S. government has actually announced October last year that there's, I think, more than $1 billion in investing in the quantum space. China, I think, by far the largest in the last year. So I think they have about $10 billion allocated to the quantum research. All right, so I think let's talk about, that's all about, the evolution of quantum computing. I think that's going to become mainstream at some point. So how is this going to revolutionize AI, right? So I think the intrinsic nature of quantum computing and its the particles being in multiple state at the same time, I think that sort of that superposition concept is actually going to power the AI deep learning, right? So I think, for example, the picture that you see here is the way how the input is kind of broken to different layers, and that's being able to, by a deep neural networks learning, right? The way how it works is basically just kind of adjusting the strengths to, of connections to different neurons and then across different layers. And this is sort of like a matrix, right? So in a classical computing world, right, this is going to take quite a bit time to actually sort of calculate and basically sort of come up with the output. But in case of quantum computing, it's because of the superposition concept, right? So it actually can perform all this at a much, much faster pace. So it's so quantum computing is actually not for all use cases, but at certain use cases, it is going to be exponentially faster than traditional computing. And this is actually going to help in addressing the challenges that we see with Moore's law. So we are already bumping against Moore's law. It's basically, Moore's law is how fast the number of transistors in a given chip is doubling. I think it used to double like every 18 months. Now I think it is more than 2 years. So I think the performance capacity, about the processing power of traditional computing is actually sort of slowing down. So I think that's where I guess the quantum computing is going to be able to pick up and solve some of these real world problems. So you could see 1,000 qubit quantum computer can actually help with with a lot of the machine learning sort of use cases to solve real world problems. So we have seen, what the evolution of quantum computing and how it can actually help AI solve some of the bigger problems in the industry. And I think when we come to cybersecurity and its impact on cybersecurity is twofold. One is sufficiently large quantum computer can actually run Shor's algorithm. Peter Shor introduced that algorithm in 1994. That basically sort of, if it can be run with a sufficient high-performing quantum computer, it can actually break encryption, and it can actually be used to extract private key. So this is one of the challenges with the evolution of quantum computing. And as you see, a lot of the corporations and countries sort of accelerating investment, this is going to become a challenge at some point. And the other impact of on the evolution of quantum computing is that it can be used to create a stronger cryptography, and which definitely requires a quantum internet, quantum computers to actually sort of encrypt and decrypt data, right? So I think that is definitely one positive impact on cybersecurity, and it can actually sort of help protect some of the innovations like blockchain, or potentially sort of accelerate and help other innovative solutions in the industry. It's not only encryption, it is also authentication, as you can see. So I think it's basically the secret keys being extracted using a sufficiently large size quantum computers. So that I think is a challenge of its own. So a lot of the sensitive defense installations, if you think, I think there's an article that I read, a lot of the US defense installations have already moved on to post-quantum cryptography. And I think a lot of the critical infrastructure installations are also actually moving, or in the process of moving to a stronger cryptography. So I think this can potentially create challenges, and obviously encryption, right? So I think the challenge with this and on the encryption side is harvest and decrypt. So data that is valuable today and the data that is valuable even 10 years from now, if that can be harvested and stored and decrypted retrospectively, that is actually going to create challenges. So something like intellectual property data being decrypted even in the future is going to create challenges for countries, companies, the whole industry. And one important challenge there also, if you, in the investment that we see, there's a lot of investment in quantum computing, but then there's not much you don't see that level of investment in the development of quantum resistant cryptography. So the PQC is kind of evolving, but I think that still lacks that level of investment. Moving to a PQC in real time is like changing tires on a moving car. And we all know very well that if it's not done right, the right way, it can render data unusable. And yeah, I think we all know with SHA-1 being broken in 2005, and it took more than 10 years for SHA-2 adoption rate to go about 70%. So it's a challenge, and I think it needs to, the move to forced quantum cryptography is something that needs to be, planned in advance. A lot of the companies are already doing that, preparing for data apocalypse. So I think with respect to post-quantum cryptography as well, as I said, it is still evolving. There's no clear standard in the industry. NIST is scrambling, and I think they've actually collected a lot of, I think they've gotten a few rounds of proposals, and I think they're getting closer. I think it is going to take a couple more years for them to be able to standardize PQC. Ultimately, all this depends on how fast a quantum computer becomes mainstream, and a functional computer with that that level of qubit size that's required to actually run Shor's algorithm. I think it all depends on those factors. I think, and there is also data, the harvest and decrypt that we spoke about, right? Even data that is valuable data that is, it can be harvested and decrypted later on. That's still a challenge. So even if it's going to take 10 years from now to actually become, for that to become reality. I think it's a question of if, not a question of when, and I think there's a lot of investment happening in the space, with China sort of claiming the recent quantum supremacy. There's going to be a potential for that data apocalypse. So I think leveraging quantum, post-quantum, are preparing to move to post-quantum cryptography is something that needs to be looked at by companies and governments across the world, and harnessing the power of quantum computer to attack the current challenges, and also okay. I think ultimately, all this depends on how fast a quantum computer become mainstream. Quantum computer with sufficient capacity to run Shor's algorithm, and that. Okay, no, I'm again lost the train of thought there. Ultimately, all this depends on how fast a quantum computer becomes mainstream. Quantum computer with sufficient capacity to run Shor's algorithm. And then also depends on how fast a PQC is going to pick up in the industry. I think we have seen with the SHA-2 adoption and other migration to other newer encryption algorithms, it's always a challenge. So I think need to prepare for implementing PQC in advance. And that will actually help companies and the countries to be able to adopt and implement this. Okay, no, sorry, I don't know. This is ultimately all this depends on how fast a quantum computer becomes mainstream. I think a quantum computer with relatively sufficient capacity to be able to run Shor's algorithm. At the same time, the speed of development and standardization of PQC. So I think we have seen with SHA-2, the amount of time it took for adoption. So the speed of implementation of PQC it also matters. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when. We kind of seen that. So with a lot of these investments skyrocketing across the globe, the reality, quantum computer becoming a reality is going to be much sooner than we thought. The first actor are an entity. If they're able to break through in the quantum space, they will have a significant economical and political advantage, if you can think about. Potentially become the super, global quantum superpower. So leveraging and harnessing the power of quantum computing to attack the current challenges, and also sort of preparing to attack some of the future challenges, is how companies and the countries can actually use it to stay relevant now as well as in the future. If you have any further questions, please feel free to reach out to me on the platform. And thanks for having me here. Have a great rest of the day.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your insights with us, Balu. We really appreciate you sharing these thoughts with us. Next up, we have two speakers, Scott Miserandino and Rick Mishka of BlueVector, a Comcast company. Dr. Scott Miserandino leads BlueVector's engineering and research team. He is responsible for building a cybersecurity solution that enhances the cyber analyst's ability to identify, reason over, and act on both known and previously unknown threats. He has overseen multiple machine learning-based threat detection engines and research into high-speed emulation-based fileless threat detection. Prior to joining BlueVector, Dr. Miserandino spent 5 years working on advanced network sensors and cybersecurity analytics for the U.S. Department of Defense and intelligence community. Joining Dr. Miserandino is Rick Mishka. Rick is a former Army Special Forces sergeant who has worked his way into the cybersecurity space with the focus on helping customers become more aware of technologies that grow the cyber resiliency of their security profile. As a technical product sales manager for BlueVector, he is tasked with highlighting how AI and machine learning can be used across multiple attack vectors to better protect network environments. Please join me in welcoming them both to our stage.
Thank you, Patricia, for the introduction. I'm Scott Miserandino, and I'm excited about the opportunity to address the AI for Cybersecurity conference this year and to discuss the important role artificial intelligence is and will continue to play in securing our critical networks, private data, and intellectual property. I've been working in cybersecurity for over 10 years, helping to secure some of our nation's most critical networks in the commercial and federal space. As part of BlueVector's founding team of engineers, data scientists, and cybersecurity operators within Northrop Grumman, I was motivated by our customers' challenge to develop a technology capable of identifying malware before it was seen in the wild, to put in place a defense that could, for once, be ahead of the threat. Something strategic with the potential to disrupt an adversary who is prepared to bring the fullest extent of their cunning to the chess game that is cybersecurity. And so began my journey on applying artificial intelligence to cybersecurity. But more on that later. First, I'd like to take a moment to consider why such a bold challenge was necessary at all. As a former NSA deputy director once stated, if we were to score cybersecurity the way we score soccer, the tally would be 462 to 456, 20 minutes into the game. In other words, all offense. Of course, he was speaking of the game as played by nation states. For those of us without the legal means to fight back, the score would be more like 462 to 0. The only reason why we might not have lost yet is that the other team hasn't decided to take the field against us. I don't mean to sound overly bleak, but we need to look no further than the recent events surrounding the SolarWinds hack and the subsequent confirmed compromise of thousands, yes, thousands of companies and government agencies, some of the biggest and most sophisticated in the world, to prove just how effective an attacker can be against even the most well-funded defenses. Like any sport, however, when you lose, it's not just the skill and inventiveness and execution of your opponent that matter, but also how well you play and the levelness of the playing field itself. And in cybersecurity, the playing field is not fair. To try and level this playing field, defenders have been investing in and relying on technology for decades. Let's consider the evolution in detection technology in particular. In the beginning, there were signatures. Cybersecurity was just emerging from the primordial ooze. The focus was on developing static identifiers that could easily be shared amongst thousands of individuals and companies. This early form of detection was effective at establishing a type of herd immunity amongst participants in the share. Sure, there were a few who had to suffer for the benefit of the many, but after that, things were relatively safe. Then adversaries evolved. They began to develop techniques like polymorphism and rapidly spreading worms, designed to defeat the static and relatively slow nature of the signature sharing. And so the next stage of defensive evolution was triggered. Defenders began to focus on the behavior of the suspect software rather than on the static properties that could be identified by signatures or hashes. Sandboxing is introduced, as well as behavioral heuristics on endpoints. After a period of success for these technologies, adversaries once again began to adapt. They introduced anti-sandbox and VM-aware features into the malware designed to bypass this dynamic analysis. The level of anti-AV features in malware increased to avoid behavioral monitoring at the endpoint. At this point, defenders are starting to wonder if there is some technology out there that could just adapt to new malware features automatically, something downright futuristic. Enter the third stage of defensive technology evolution, the age of artificial intelligence. The war of the machines is on. Everyone is hyped about the potential for AI to transform how we detect and hunt for adversaries in our networks. New AI-driven startups spring to life. New products flood the market. People start trusting the math. And then users start to realize that the age of AI doesn't quite look like our friend the T800, but something a little bit closer to this. A lot of hype, a fair amount of confusion, and a difficult to articulate value proposition relative to established technologies. Let's take a look back at that early stage of detection development. The early protozoic life of signatures and packet filters, designed for sharing and to establish herd immunity through mass distribution. Every customer got the same set of signatures and the same signature evaluation engine, the lock on the door to our networks. The bad guys quickly figured out that they could buy the same lock. They could play with it in their basements and intelligence headquarters until their software could easily bypass it. When I said earlier that cybersecurity does not have a fair playing field, this is a perfect example. Here, the attacker not only gets to pick the time and target of the attack, but they get a priori access to the defense as well. No wonder it's easy to score. So what happened when the next stage of evolution comes along? Yes, we have a better lock, but we distribute it in exactly the same way. Everyone gets the same copy, including the bad guys. Once again, it's only a matter of time before these methods are rendered nearly ineffective. All right, so AI finally starts to show up, and what happens? Are we going to follow the same pattern of developing engines and distributing the same learning models to everyone? Some will. They'll take their better lock and distribute it in the same fashion as previous technologies distributed theirs. The flaw in the logic is pretty obvious. We need to stop letting the bad guys get a copy of the defenses. We need to find a way to give different locks to everyone, including the bad guy. I call this concept a moving defense. It's moving because it changes as the adversary moves from enterprise to enterprise, and also can change within a given enterprise over time as they figure out ways to change and alter their individual locks. The important thing is that everyone's defenses are different and that the bad guy doesn't get a complete copy of anyone's. The days when they can just test their malware and know that it'll work and remain undetected when they launch it against a variety of targets would be over. If there's any doubt that this is what the adversaries are doing, you just have to look at the malware itself. You can literally see the case statements where they're looking for individual AV technologies or sandboxes, sometimes by name of the vendor, and changing or altering the way that that malware operates if those are found. And I, as a software developer, know I've never released any code that I haven't tested. So if it's in the code, you know they were testing it against those technologies to make sure it worked. As I said, this is not a mind-blowing idea, but there are some pretty good reasons why it has not happened yet. First, how are we supposed to make different locks for every customer? Sounds time-consuming and expensive to me. And even if we could make them, how could you make sure that all the different locks are sufficiently unique, yet have the same effectiveness? I don't know about you, but I wouldn't want to be the one to get the second best lock. And here is where AI will break the mold. AI provides the means to achieve a moving defense. It doesn't guarantee it. One can still use AI, but keep the old distribution models, and people have. But it does offer the opportunity. With AI, you can learn from your environment. The data used to build the model is unique to each network, and therefore the models will be unique. If done carefully, these models can also achieve nearly identical high performance against standard verification stats. This statistical equivalence means no one needs to get the second best lock. Everyone can get an equally effective one. So with careful design of modeling engines, data curation, and feature engineering, we can begin to level that playing field. And I think that is the charge to this conference and to you as individuals to make sure that that happens. So what does this mean for where we are with applying artificial intelligence to cybersecurity? Well, I think we are somewhere more like this, right? We're not quite at the T800 level yet, but we are moving beyond the Bender stage and into a world where we are changing long-standing practices of distributing the same detection models to everyone. And I think our future is bright here with AI, and I look forward to discussing some of the unique ways that we're applying artificial intelligence for cybersecurity at BlueVector. And with that, I'd like to invite my colleague, Rick Mishna, up to ask a few questions.
Thank you, Scott. I appreciate the humor and the monologue. The folks at the Tonight Show might want to hire you on pretty quickly.
I'm available.
Perfect. I think that would be good. I'll be the sidekick. I'll be sitting on the couch next to you. So, Scott, you spoke about the potential for artificial intelligence to make a strategic difference in the balance of power between the good guys and the bad guys, and put the two on a more equal playing field, making the score not 400 and something to 0, but making it far closer. So while that is an interesting insight, what have you done to make that a reality?
Yeah, and it's not just about making that score closer, but also just making it lower, right? And that's really the value in the defense. And at BlueVector, we've been developing novel ways of applying supervised machine learning in particular to the detection of malware. We've been doing it for almost a decade now. So that's much earlier than many have begun trumpeting machine learning or artificial intelligence in their marketing brochures. And while there are many ways AI is getting applied to cybersecurity ecosystem today, malware detection was amongst the first to be ready for prime time. And BlueVector was the first product to offer an AI-based malware detection capability at the network level. We built and continue to improve on an AI-based malware detection engine that can analyze samples in milliseconds, not minutes, allowing users to scan every file seen by the network in near real time with unsurpassed precision and recall. We then went a step further and developed a patented technology to perform the supervised learning process in a completely automated fashion without the need to send sensitive data files off our customer networks. And we have customers with some of the most sensitive networks in the world. And that the ones that originally set that challenge before us operated some of those very sensitive networks. And file sharing, while it is more common today, is something that is still not allowed for them. And they needed this ability to operate completely on premise. And doing machine learning in that fashion and doing supervised machine learning in that fashion is particularly challenging. And I think we've gone a long way in cracking that nut with our in situ machine learning capability within the BlueVector advanced threat detection product.
So Scott, BlueVector primarily focuses on supervised learning techniques. Are those the best?
Yes, right. You're correct. Of course, we do focus on using supervised machine learning techniques within our ATD product. As for being the best, I think it's the best at solving the zero-day malware detection problem. AI is like any other tool set. You have to pick the right tool for from the set for the job at hand. AI has much broader applications to cybersecurity than just malware detection. In fact, malware detection and supervised learning is not even the most popular application today. Unsupervised learning used in anomaly detection for threat hunting has become more common as people focus more on finding existing breaches in their network. It's become fashionable even to say that we should all just assume our networks are compromised. I personally don't believe we should all give up on pre-breach or early breach detection, as it still provides the most effective way of limiting or eliminating our adversaries' time in our networks. The focus on threat hunting using anomaly detection, user entity behavioral analytics, or tradecraft-based heuristics is certainly an important insurance policy and security best practice. But I always remind people that a good day for your hunting team is still a really bad day for your CISO, because he's the one that's going to have to report that there's been a breach and that it's been going on for days, weeks, or months. And in some ways, the horse has already left the barn.
I don't envy the CISOs that are out there having to deal with that. What are some of the greatest challenges you see in getting artificial intelligence to have a bigger role in cybersecurity?
Well, if you listen to the vendor marketing, you think AI was all over cybersecurity. The reality is that it's there, but does face some major hurdles to adoption. Even the products that do the AI well are often still being used by security operators more for visibility than for their detection capabilities, and are only trusted if they can be confirmed by other more basic techniques, such as signatures or cyber intelligence indicators of compromise. AI adoption is challenging for really two fundamental reasons. First, the alerting mechanisms are at their core statistical, meaning that given some number of evaluations, there is an expected number of false positives. I mentioned this concept earlier about statistical equivalency, allowing models, different models that behave differently, perhaps even using different feature sets, to be considered equivalent because they have the same relative performance against a verification set. But in operational use, this statistical behavior of the detection models does present some challenges. And it's something that has not been historically true of other detection techniques such as signatures, which tend to have actually relatively few false positives, but suffer greatly from false negatives. And given that most networks aren't actually in a continuous state of breach or under a continuous state of attack, what most cybersecurity analysts and SOC operators deal with are the false positives. These are the alerts of the detection engine when really nothing bad or no real adversarial activity is going on within the network. And this leads to an erosion of trust in the detection engine. For example, let's just say I had a model that had both a 0.1% simultaneous false positive and false negative rate. As a data scientist, I'd be super happy, right? I mean, I'd probably even be a little concerned about overfitting, right? Because it's just too good to be true, getting a model with that great a performance. But now in operations, that same model needs to perform, let's say 100,000 evaluations a day. And in some things, it might be looking at network flows. It might even be 10 times or 100 times this. And on a clean network, statistically, you would still expect about 100 false positives a day. And that means an analyst is getting 100 alerts a day, all of which are false positives. Put it that way, and it doesn't seem so good. Now take a signature that might have a 0% false positive rate, but a 99% false negative rate. Those same 100,000 evaluations result in 0 alerts and 0 false positives. Now add in one truly malicious event. The AI engine catches it with 99.9% likelihood, almost certainty. The signature has a 1% chance of catching it, so it probably doesn't. And I wouldn't want to hang my hat on that. But because the analysts experience the false positives, but not the risk of the false negative, all the perceived value is in being low false positive. But that's not how a data scientist measures success. So there's a pretty big disconnect between operational value and how we measure the effectiveness of AI models. So everyone using AI for detection, whether pre or post breach, needs to find a way of sustaining a low false negative rate while not driving away analysts. The second challenge is analysts, like most humans, find it hard to trust something they don't understand. I don't mean they don't understand the data science behind the AI, which is true. Most of them don't. But they are willing to give that the benefit of the doubt. They're willing to kind of trust the math a little bit. What they're not so willing to do is trust an alert where they don't understand the cybersecurity reasoning behind it. Since most AI models are opaque, meaning that they can't explain why they've come to some conclusion in a way that is satisfying to the user, analysts tend to need or want additional verification. But as soon as you add this verification step in, you're now no better than your weakest link, that verification step. Again, usually this reliance on signatures or IOCs, or perhaps very time-consuming manual evaluation of network log data to do that verification something bad actually is going on. And that's why providing context and not confirmation is key to success with the application of AI models in real cybersecurity use cases. The analyst leveraging their training has to be able to see the bad activity happening so that they come to trust the alerting mechanism, and also so they will elevate it and get the problem fixed within their network. The AI-based analysis is there to just help them focus on the needle in the haystack, but few will let the AI just declare a needle because that has some real business implications. So Rick, do you have any other questions?
Thanks for that, Scott. Actually, say that again. That way she can clear that. We'll start from there.
So Rick, do you have any other questions?
I do have one more question. You spoke a lot about how artificial intelligence is being used for malware detection, zero-day malware, anomaly detection, across the gambit, all the different use cases. But I'm curious about the living off the land or fileless malware attempts. Could you explain that and maybe show us how AI, or tell us how AI is being used for that today?
Yes. So, fileless attacks are certainly, one of the more common vectors that we see today in the wild for malware. And it's an interesting misnomer because fileless attacks pretty much always include some sort of a file when you get down to it. What it really refers to, the term, is that this malware or broader attack vector doesn't leave any file-based artifact on the endpoint. And it was originally designed as sort of an AV evasion technology. AVs typically watch the file system for changes. When a new file gets created, they scan it. And so if you don't create any files, right, you don't get scanned. And that's sort of the genesis of this attack. And it is oftentimes related to the use of existing tools on the system, or leverages existing tools on the system. Oftentimes script execution engines. So in the Windows world, PowerShell is often very much associated with fileless attacks. And that can be challenging for a lot of reasons, because it is a legitimate administration tool, so you can't just flag everything using PowerShell. And the challenge that the detection engines face in trying to find fileless attacks are sort of twofold. One is, can you detect the attack early enough before it has a chance to leverage, say, a fileless portion of the attack? So we do see a lot of things that are termed fileless attack that actually only a portion of the attack is fileless. The beginning of the attack might come from a weaponized Word document sent in a phishing email in order to establish that beachhead, which has been, after which they then leverage things like PowerShell to continue the attack. So the first thing is, doing a good job at scanning and preventing those. And that can be done using traditional techniques, both at the endpoint and network level. The more cunning fileless attacks, which are challenging, is at the network level, where there's perhaps a phishing email that starts it, but it directs you to a web page that then begins a chain of exploitation. And this landing page begins by profiling the endpoint and then downloading some sort of exploit. So this is a traditional attack via exploit kits. And this is difficult to deal with at the network level or at the endpoint level, and very difficult to deal with at the network level, and changes a lot. It's very dynamic. These landing pages There's few IOCs are written in time. So you need to be able to understand how the web page is behaving. And this is where AI comes in. If you can understand the activity within these web pages, these landing pages for exploit kit delivery, you can begin to detect them, whether at the endpoint or at the network level. And to do that, you really need an engine that is capable of understanding how the dynamic portions of web pages driven by JavaScript are behaving, be able to gather features from that behavior, build models based on known exploit kit landing pages and other known malicious JavaScript, and then give a result. And the challenge, a lot of that is challenging, but the real challenge is the one I kind of mentioned earlier, with the number of evaluations a model has to go through. And JavaScript at an enterprise level is seen not 100,000 times a day, but millions to tens of millions of times a day. So the fidelity of your machine learning model needs to be incredibly high, as well as your ability to extract, identify, and build the JavaScript itself in order to perform the analysis at all. And then you have to be able to do that at line rate. So there's nothing easy about doing fileless detection at a network level. It's hard at the endpoint as well. The good news is that at least we at BlueVector have sort of cracked that nut. We've spent years and have patented technologies dedicated to solving this fileless detection problem at the network level, so you can apply it across systems that you don't have the opportunity to put in an advanced endpoint capability that could do it within the browsers at the endpoint. So you can get full network coverage using a BlueVector technology at the network level.
Thank you, Scott. That's great. Thank you, AI4 Cybersecurity Summit, and thanks everyone for coming to this session.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you so much for your time. I hope you enjoyed the talk.
Thank you to the BlueVector team. That was stupendous. Jamie Holcomb is the Chief Information Officer for the United States Patent and Trademark Office. In this role, he is the principal advisor to the agency on the design, development, and management of its information systems and technology. Most recently, Mr. Holcomb served as the Chief Executive Officer of Visium Technologies, a cybersecurity startup, and Chief Operations Officer for TJ Westlake LLC, a service-disabled, veteran-owned small business. Prior to these executive roles, he served as the Vice President and General Manager for Harris Caprock Critical Networks segment, providing managed security services supporting air traffic management, energy and maritime communications, ground network operations and sustainment, and high-value IT and engineering cyber services. Mr. Holcomb began his career as an officer in the U.S. Army, where he served as company commander in the 1,116th Signal Battalion and was awarded both the Douglas MacArthur Leadership Award and Most Outstanding Officer of the Year. Please join me in welcoming Jamie to the virtual stage.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I'm really excited to speak with you about the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office's journey with artificial intelligence and machine learning. I say it's a journey, of course, because it started about 3 years ago before I was ever even with the PTO. Now, I've been there almost 2 years, and we have progressed tremendously over the past 3 years with AI and ML. And so, can I have the next slide, please? I wanted to say that mission matters at the Patent and Trademark Office. And why do I say that? Well, the PTO is America's innovation agency. We are one of the few agencies mentioned in the U.S. Constitution. So our authority is to be an independent agency from the Constitution itself. And so the number one patent that was signed by George Washington was something called potash. That's an agrarian product, much like fertilizer. But isn't that so apropos for America, the first patent to be about fertilizer? I say that with a tongue-in-cheek way because you have to have fun when you're doing these things. And I'm sure that all of you on your AI journey need that sense of humor when you run into all these obstacles. So next slide, please. Our top initiatives at the PTO have included using machine learning as the basis for our AI projects. Why do I say that? Because me personally, Jamie Holcomb, does not believe that there's any such thing as the singularity of artificial intelligence. I love watching science fiction movies just like everyone else, but I don't believe it to be true. Now, I was doing artificial intelligence back in the day with fuzzy logic and Lisp. I actually programmed in Lisp. But where are those things nowadays? Well, they've been rolled into some of the machines and some of our algorithms that we use to this day. And so I truly believe that we've advanced our algorithms. And maybe the reason that AI and ML have come to the fore is because we had never had the data stores in the large quantities that we do over the last 10 years. And that's contributed to be able to glean certain ideas and analysis that heretofore were never possible because those large data stores were never able to be put together. And if you can imagine, since the beginning of 200 years, the United States Patent and Trademark Office, we have a lot of data, 19 terabytes. Now, are we going through high performance with those 19 terabytes? And are they in cache? No way. There's no way anybody could do that. But we do have a lot of data performance needs. And so in our machine learning, what we set out to do is augment our examiners in pursuit of analysis so that we can create timely applications. And that's something, a term of art in the IP world, intellectual property world, called pendency. So the pendency is the time that you submit an application to the time it's registered as a trademark or awarded as a patent or rejected in the same way. And so we want to decrease those pendency times. And we think we can do that if the machine learning, can actually help us and get us there quicker and faster. And so what have we done? Well, I've actually sent some of our top engineers, our top programmers, and we've decided to standardize around Python and TensorFlow. And so I sent 6 of my engineers to the West Coast and 6 to the East Coast, and they all got googly. And that certified the ability to use the TensorFlow neural network algorithms. It's open source, but Google is supporting that. And I really love what happened when they came back, because they were able to take their learning in natural language processing and other advanced algorithms and apply them directly to some of the problems that we have at the patent office. One primary problem being classification. When we classify patents as they come in, if they're not classified correctly, they go to the wrong examiner, because a microbiology examiner has no clue to what a mechanical engineer examiner has. And so we have thousands of classifications, and they need to get quickly to the right examiner at the right time. What we've done with our classification machine learning is actually been able to eliminate some of our human interaction, and we've been able to get it, instead of weeks now, it's down to hours. And that's a fantastic use case for machine learning. Because of that, we're looking at our accuracy and our precision in that classification. Now, we always have to make sure that we don't have a bias in that classification, because that bias could be fed back and repeated and repeated. So what do? We put the actual examiner in charge. So as I said before, these machine learning tools are just that. They augment the examiner. They don't direct him. He directs the tools. She goes through and makes category claims. Instead of having the machine run amok, we put a person in the loop to ensure that the decisions are made at the right time and that the feedback can actually enhance the classification, i.e., we'll give rankings of thumbs up or thumbs down, as well as a relative number or rank within a group. And so in that regard, we can feed back that examiner input to the final result of classification. And it's really helping us. Not only that, but one of the holy grails in examination for patents is the search. Can you imagine that the examiner has to certify that this is a unique and novel idea? Nobody else has had it, and nobody else currently has it. And so that takes a lot of searching. We're using machine learning right now to go through those searches throughout the internet, as well as other places. And so it's been a fantastic way to help the examiner augment them in their search. So once we do this, we've gotten a lot of creativity and innovation within the agency because of the change that it brings. It actually enables more time to be more creative and thoughtful in the examination. And such, we've had an enterprise transformation. In other words, a cultural shift where we need these machine algorithms to be put in quicker and faster into the mainline workflow of the examiner. And in order to do that, what we've created is the ability to transform our whole enterprise of IT from a project model to a product model. We took over 200 projects and actually mapped them into 30 products. And each product then has a product owner from the business that it represents and a technical lead, as well as the resources required for development, enhancements, and modernization, along with operations and maintenance, so that you can actually take a team and understand how to retire the technical debt of that product while also enhancing and making it better for the users. And so that takes a whole cultural shift over to the product management. And we are using agility and the DevSecOps way to create new enhancements and overcome the old technical debt. And it's been a great transformation. We're right in the middle of scaling it up for the entire organization. And of course, there's been proponents and there's been detractors. And so what you have to do is you have to overcome those detractors with the proponents and keep the momentum moving forward. Well, all of this wouldn't be possible without cybersecurity. So the fact of the matter is, people are trying to steal our patents, and they're trying to steal our trademarks and creating fraud amongst the system. We are preventing that using artificial intelligence and machine learning algorithms to actually identify the fraud quicker and faster and cheaper than before. Whereas relying upon a human to search a huge database is really wearisome for the individual person. A machine is more apt to be able to do that. And so through our cybersecurity efforts, we've been not only able to remediate vulnerabilities, but also identify fraud before it happens. And so that's a great thing. And we're trying to implement that fraud detection into the operations, because right now it's in the pilot stages. So we're having a lot of great movement forward with AI, machine learning, and also robotic process automation, the other end of the spectrum for AI, a very mundane way to automate the heretofore manual and clerical tasks of individuals. You're able to take RPA and create a quicker and cheaper way to automate processes. So it's been a fantastic way forward for us. So in closing, before I take questions and so forth, I just wanted to make sure that people understood we're leveraging AI in areas of cybersecurity, resiliency, and moving to the cloud. So thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with you.
Thank you, Jamie. That was amazing. Feel free to find Jamie in the networking app to chat more. That's it for today's general session. I hope you found it eye-opening. We're going to take a short break, and then at 2:30 Eastern Time, the tracks will begin. Like yesterday, we will have 5 tracks today: detection and response, data privacy and security, the technical track, where you'll find nuanced model-level insights, the speaker meet and greets, and the innovation stage, where you'll find founders of leading cybersecurity startups. All tracks have world-class speakers, so you can't go wrong. Have the best digital conference day of your life.